really from the dry August that we've had, progressing into a dry September, there's been the drawdown in soil moisture from this wheat crop. Yes, and we can also see that stepping effect as well. So there's daytime use of the wheat crop, and that ceases during the night. Okay, so this is the individual sensors from Jung, stacked as they're found in the soil profile. So from 20 centimetres down to 70 centimetres with this slide here. It's showing spring last year. I'd probably just like to, put all the focus to what was happening in June this year, where we can see a dramatic increase in a lot of the sensors, down to 40 and 50 centimetres. And that indicates that there's been that infiltration with that significant rain that fell on, June 8th. We didn't see additional increases at 60 and 70, and that's because there was still that good carryover of soil moisture from last spring and summer. I've just highlighted at times you do get a bit of noise with the graphs with these separate stacked traces, and really I sort of just look past that and look to then see what the responses were to rain events. But when we focus in on the last month, which is over here, we can see the drawdown from the wheat crop commencing at 20 centimetres, 30, 40, and it's happening all the way down at 70 centimetres. So we can see that the crop, in the absence of rainfall, is and this is the lower sensors. So that's from 80 centimetres down to a metre, 1.3. And a lot of the time, it's not going to be in play, but it's certainly in the dry September that we're having, we're actually observing some dry down from the 80 centimetre sensor, which is just, again, stacked in the profile as they're found. So 80, 90, down to the 1.3. So there's still a big reservoir of soil moisture available for that crop. Warwick Nabil. So we can move on to Warwick Nabil. Again, it's going through spring last year, getting to that field capacity at the total soil moisture, which is broken down into the upper soil moisture and the lower soil moisture. Again, all the deep sensors haven't changed. The main thing we can focus in on here is the sensors from 20 centimetres to 70 centimetres. And they certainly, again, have had that response to the June rain to bring us up to a field capacity. And at Warwick Nabil, what do we have growing there? That was lentils last year. So a little bit of late season moisture was being consumed, and it's canola growing this year. So we have been observing canola really using the soil moisture in the last month. Year on year, green 2022. This is blue, the current line. If I was going to be doing some troubleshooting with this graph, these little marks here would probably be a drop in battery voltage and probably some errors coming through. But all in all, the data still seems quite sound. I can certainly see that this is a field capacity point up here, and we're starting to see that drawdown in the soil moisture from the canola. When we looked at the individual stacked soil moisture traces, it is occurring from 20, 30 and 40 centimetres and a little bit at 50. And that was after the connection and the increase in the improvement in soil moisture from the June rain events in winter. If you're going to ask, how do you actually know that the probes are working and effectively showing the soil moisture changes? The platform is great that you can zoom in. So we've been looking at the whole 12-month view. For this one here, it's looking at 2 weeks. So you can zoom in and you can actually see the daytime use, which pauses at night. The daytime really starts up at about 8 o'clock for moisture use and ceases at about 6 o'clock at night. And again, it's the lower stacked sensors here with this display, and September, October, and progressing into November, opportunity to refill and recharge. And because they've stayed at that static point and the same level right throughout in the past 11 months. They're full and they've remained full. So that's the reservoir of water to tap into for this season, if required by the canola. And then we can just move into Baroque. Yep. And just looking at focusing on the total soil moisture.
So it's another canola crop.
It's
canola
another
wheat stubble.
Wheat last season and canola growing this year. Yep. And again, all the deep soil moisture is still in place from last year. We had the connection of last season's moisture to this season's moisture with the June rain, and now we're starting to see that drawdown in soil water.
So a comment here or question, why are the values so much higher? Probably a good point to mention that the values themselves don't mean much.
Yes, the values on this y-axis here are the capacitance values. So we've got 12 sensors, all with their individual value, but they've been combined to give us the summed line. We need the values to plot it, but it doesn't represent mils. At this stage, we can get a full point with the bucket and get to establish that lower point.
Okay, we'll go to the next one.
And the next one below that. So this site's got 3 years of data, so we can go back to 21, 22 being the green line, and 23 being the blue line. It's actually got wetter than what it was in spring last year, so obviously a really wet winter, and just starting to see some drawdown in soil moisture from those shallow sensors, which we can detect from the individual ones with the stacked. I think if we click on that one, it's pretty evident that 20, 30, 40, 20, 30, 40, and a little bit at 50 is starting to have the drawdown, and still all that deep moisture from below that is still in place. And I think we can just
a technical troubleshooting question, but it can be quite, if people are worried about the season because of what they're hearing in terms of rainfall slowing up, and they start to see that drawdown, is that a reason to panic, Dale, or is that just normal crop biology?
Well, I'd say it's an indication of a high yield potential crop. So we've had the positive signs to initiate the season and progressing through winter, that the deep soil moisture reserves were there. We could detect that by the probes, probably ground truthed and validated with some soil testing as well. So we do know that when we set up crops with high yield potential, they're growing biomass, they're extending a root system down to tap into the potential reservoir of moisture that's sitting down below. So to be concerned, I think it's probably just something that we do observe this time during spring, when crop demands are exceeding rainfall.
Yeah, I seem to recall years ago that it was something like 60 or 70% of water use happens at this time of year. Is that a...
Yes, yeah, that can be the case. Probably what we have seen in the absence of rainfall in some years with high yield potential cereal crops, sort of profiles from 30 centimetres down to a metre can be depleted in the space of 6 weeks when you don't get that supporting rainfall. So August is such a valuable contributor to delaying the soil moisture depletion, and in some districts we're able to get average or somewhere near average August rainfall, but those that didn't get near their average, they probably started that moisture depletion a bit earlier than others.
Bronwyn, would you like to give us an update on the project itself and what's happening? You might need to come off mute. There you go. Well done.
Thanks, Kate. So we're at the point where we've got over 70 soil moisture probes and weather stations in the network now. So we've met our commitments there. Then I've been working with Tim at Integrated Irrigation, who's been incredibly patient with me getting all of those sites online, and then ensuring that they're all reading fairly regularly. So we're at a point now where it's accessible, can be used by general members of the public, it can be farmers, it can be agros, whoever. And then it's my role really now just to keep an eye on those sites and make sure that we're getting regular readings. It's nothing worse than hopping online and going to a site near you and not having the data there. So it's a bit of a team approach. So we've worked with landholders in the Wimmera to host those sites. So often that might be just a battery's out or something like that that a farmer needs to replace, and then we get it back online as soon as we can. So yeah, it's been a busy few years getting it up and running. It's ironically had a lot of issues with really wet weather, making it quite hard to get the soil moisture probes in. But now that we've got it, it's going to be a brilliant asset for Wimmera farmers. So it's great to have it finally up and running.
Fantastic. Question for Tim. We noticed when we were going through the data ourselves, a couple of times when we clicked on a potential site, it was coming up with no data. And I was wondering, was that just because our system was a bit slow when we were being impatient, or what could be the reasons why someone's site might not be showing up on the network?
There's quite a few reasons. Dale was very kind in his comments earlier about how well Bushlinks is able to pull in data from all sorts of different sources, which it does do. There are some inherent challenges with doing that. In putting this whole site together, there has also been a few sites that probably actually just need to be deleted, to be honest. They just haven't ended up being used as an active site that has hardware attached to it. And that's probably just a cleanup exercise for us to go through and get rid of those couple of ones. Invariably with hardware in the field, as things age and need maintenance and so forth, there are times when things just need to be fixed to get the data to be coming through in a live fashion as well. So there might be a small gap in the current data there until something's fixed up. In running these sites long term, there are instances where with damage or just a fault with the equipment, we do need to do things like change over the data logger, take out the old one that's not functioning and put a new one in. And that then requires all the back end of the system to be updated and to plug in those new data loggers and get the data streaming through. So there's a number of reasons why these things can happen. The long and the short for customers and anyone using the platform is the sooner faults are identified and reported, the sooner we can fix them up.
Yeah, which leads me to my next question is, if somebody finds something they don't expect, or they've had a random malfunction with a piece of farm machinery that's caused an issue, who should they contact?
In this network, if it's one of the participants that has the weather station, certainly they should be calling their own provider that installed the station. They're the ones that are looking after them on the farm. If it's a software related thing, Bronwyn or myself, I believe there's a couple of email addresses floating around on the system to report faults on the login screen and so forth. So certainly pop an email through and we'll get that sorted and some feedback when it's all running.
Fantastic. And good question there from Matthew Coop that would not only apply to his probes, but there might be other people out there with probes that aren't part of the program. And Bronwyn has indicated that she's happy to include them in the network and will be in touch. And another question there from Matthew Coop: who are some of the various hardware and communications providers used by different landowners? Bronwyn, do you want to comment on that one?
Sure. So as the hardware is owned by landholders, we didn't set any regulations around who they should work with. That was their choice. So a lot of, I guess the majority of farmers have gone with Bushlink's integrated irrigation, Leet, who's online today. I'm not going to remember all the business names off the top of my head, and Adrian Orloff as well. So they've been the main weather stations and businesses people have used to purchase and install the tech.
Fantastic, and that's probably a good opportunity, Leet or Tim or any of other providers, if you happen to be online. Have you got anything you'd like to add about, I guess, your tips for maintenance, particularly of getting the best out of your data?
Well, I'll lead off. Possibly the one of the sensors of most interest to people is a rain gauge. Rain gauges do need a little bit of maintenance over time to just clear them out, make sure there's no spiders in there. It doesn't need to be done too frequently, but it is a job that does need to be done. Personally, I've always found something that really helps, that just about every farmer has in the ute with them every day, is a can of sheep grease or something like that, lanolin oil. Spray the inside of the rain gauge with that. Spiders absolutely hate the stuff, and that will certainly keep them a lot freer for a lot longer.
Oh, that sounds like a very good tip for a lot of things, including in this house. So thanks, Tim. Leet, what are your tips?
Oh, look, maintenance, if a site's installed well and cabling tucked away and those kind of things, then sensors should last 5+ years. And Tim's mentioned the rain gauges before. But if a site does go offline, a classic is there's bird poo on a solar panel, or potentially a cable has actually been chewed. If it's not stuck in conduit, or a fox or a roo or cow or something has chewed cables up. I'm sure all the service providers here have been back out to a site that's had some animal attack at some point. So if it's installed well, they generally should be pretty troublesome.
Looking at a lot of data that's got 4 or 5 years worth of data now, particularly 3 or 4 years, I assume that you're seeing that even though with the drawdown of water this year, there's still quite a bit in reserve compared to some of those other years?
Yep, been in the office this morning looking at a fair few of the Wimmera probes around Matt and throughout Victoria, and certainly it's quite amazing how much moisture is down in the profile and how much more is accessible for the wheat roots and those roots that are now getting down to sort of 70 and 80 and 100 centimetres. The soil probes are, particularly with the something like an oat and hay crop or a lentil crop, are really showing roots around 20 and 30 centimetres. So, oat and hay going a little bit deeper than that. And that's in those Wimmera clays around where Matt is. Soil probe graphs, once they've been in for 4 or 5 years, and we've seen a range of seasons where we've had the fall point as well as a dry stabber, they really are giving a pretty clear picture of where you sit at any point in the season, to give you a bit of an idea about where the graph and the slope of the graph might go as we go through spring into the grain fill period.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think this year particularly, because in most cases we have had substantial soil moisture reserves, if they can take that anxiety away, because it is an anxious time when we're not getting rain, but it I think even if they can do that from a well-being point of view, they've earned their money.
Should just say a couple of sites I have on Eyre Peninsula, South Australia, that have had full profiles. So this is on the way down to Port Lincoln. I've had full profiles or near full profiles for 3 or so years. We're actually seeing wheat and canola roots this year get down deeper and pull moisture from deeper than they have in that last 3-year period, because there's been residual moisture at depth, and we haven't had a really dry spring to warrant roots pulling all that moisture out. So I'd be pretty confident in saying that there are plenty of areas and soil types in Victoria that will have residual moisture from your last year's November rainfall will actually be there for the next 2 and 3 years to be able to be accessed.
And that's certainly our experience from after 2010 for sure. So Dale's got a question here from Cameron, and I reckon I know who Cameron is if you'd like to turn your camera on. So Cameron, you've said here, in danger of making a rule of thumb, is it about 10 centimetres of water use per week? Do you mean 10 centimetres in terms of profile depth? Is that what you're getting at there?
Yeah, Kate. I heard Dale say drew down from 30 to a metre in 6 weeks, so it might be a little bit more than 10 centimetres. I just wanted to, see if that held true amongst different seasons, or, like we're probably hotter than we were in 2019, but probably following a bit of the same rainfall trend as 2019. Whether heat and those types of things make a massive difference, or I imagine they would.
Yeah, there's a lot of contributing factors to it, and
Crop stage.
crop stage, biomass of the crop. There's no doubt that the soil moisture hosts are all looking back historically at previous years and what that drawdown trend was like, and trying to draw comparisons. Is it similar to this year, and what was the final result? Because ultimately, those yield potentials had been established, and can they be fulfilled? And so there'll be some adjustments we'd think made. I think it's so beneficial that this probe network is measuring from 20 centimetres down to 1.3. Who would have thought that there's moisture and that's going to be picked up below a metre? But we can certainly see there's been that infiltration down previous last spring, and probably a top up this winter. And the way things are tracking with some high yield potential crops of the wheat and the barley and the canola, they're certainly on their way to extracting some of that deeper moisture. But probably just a bit of a challenge to do that rule of thumb of actual moisture. But that's the beauty of the data, I think.
Yeah, we certainly do love a rule of thumb, and I guess what we're heading into there is sort of thinking about the implications and what we do with this data. And I just want to go through a few more slides to finish off. I'll just go back to sharing the screen again. We've been speaking about, I guess, our getting a handle on our current state of play with moisture, and clearly the probes are a great way of doing that, as are doing things like Dale's been doing for years, actually taking cores at this time of year and seeing how far the moisture's down, and that's a really good process too. I guess what we're not speculating, but the ultimate wondering is, what are the likelihood of rains over spring? When we have an El Nino situation, like we've finally been declared now, and when we have an IOD positive situation, these chocolate wheel graphs are essentially telling us that the odds of having a season in the driest third are higher than normal. So those little red Pac-Man type figures in the pie charts, they're the bottom 30% of rainfall, and that's the likelihood of that happening. And so in a lot of places, there's more than 50% chance based on using previous years as a guide of having rainfall in the lower third between August and October. One thing to note is that you do get seasonal variation around that. So IOD positive years, for example, haven't been as bad in the South Australian mallee as they have been, say, in just southwest of Melbourne. So you can get a little bit of variation, and just because you get, say, if you do end up with higher than average rainfall in this 3-month period, that doesn't mean that the forecasts have been wrong, because we're talking about probabilities. All that means is that, if you've got a 30% chance of exceeding median, that means that could happen 3 out of 10 years, and you've got a 70% chance of having lower than median. That has happened, 3 out of 10, yeah, and 7 out of 10. So it's just worth getting your head around probabilities. To have a look at your particular area, I really recommend you going to the Climate Tool Forecast for Profit JDC funded site, and a lot of work being put in there by the climate team from AgVic and also from SARDI. I just wanted to, this is one of the useful tools on that site. So what I've gone in and asked, what does October rainfall look like in climate phases since 1960 for Warwick Nabil? Each of these colours is a different climate phase. I call these climate moods and just find them easier to remember. So I call the La Nina IOD negative combination, like we had last year, the previous 2 years, I call that mood A. I call the combination that we've got now, the El Nino and IOD positive combination, I call that mood F. And if you have a look at this graph since 1960, there hasn't been a positive IOD season that's been above average rainfall. And particularly in the last decade, when we have positive IODs, either the orange or the red graphs, they have been pretty skinny on October rainfall. So I think that's a fair indication of the possibility of having a pretty dry finish to the season. Just so that you don't get too dismayed, though, I might get Dale, would you like to speak to this chart from Normanville in 2017?
Yeah, sure. So this is west of Kerrang, so it's on a soil type that's medium to heavy, but is in a rainfall zone that's medium. So it doesn't wet up all the years. And I think we're just seeing this reflection of a wet 2016, carryover of soil moisture into 2017. We had breaking rains and was all connected up. So we had a full profile really during winter over at Normanville. A wheat crop was growing. It was well fed for some high yield potentials. Fortunately, that season, 2017, they had some good August rains, which topped up the profile and really started spring with a full profile. But what was quite evident that in the absence of any supporting rainfall through September and really through October, all the moisture reserves were drawn upon from this wheat crop. At times, it's sort of, you're hanging in for the ride. You can see the step changes occurring daily, but you're backing yourself in with what's in reserve with soil moisture. Essentially, the result ended up quite good at a 5-ton wheat crop and pretty much finished on empty, and that's measuring from 30 to 1 metre. And I think the benefit that we've got now of measuring below 1 metre with this network, and it probably comes back to what Cam was indicating, that, you know, the crops do have the capacity to extract moisture from deeper levels. So I think that just illustrates, from a field capacity to what can be drawn down in the absence of rainfall, and the separate stacked traces just illustrate where the moisture was initially drawn from, and then to go into the grain filters really working on the really deep moisture. So that's just 1 year, and I think the the dashboard with bush links, it's got that great feature that you can stack year-on-year data. So Burke had 3 years. I noticed down at Wonwanda, there was sites that were going back to 2019. So you can get those really, good comparisons to previous years, to what crop was grown according to the spring finish and what the final result was. So there's got to be some great benefits moving forward with this network and platform.
And I guess just to finish up, these are sort of the 9 things that I've taken out of this, is that in a lot of cases there are reasonable moisture reserves. Clearly there'll be paddocks for whatever reason that won't be the case, but the signs are promising for the ones we've looked at. Below average rainfall is likely, but crops can fill without spring rain, and I think that's really important to remember. We need to be cognizant of the above average temperature likelihood that El Nino brings with us, and that these systems, this type of weather combination, can also have a possibility of late frosts. I think on the positive side too, though, is that grain and hay price outlooks are quite promising, and so it's well worth doing some price by yield calculations before making too many decisions. Consider a few futures of yield and income, and data really helps this decision making, and it gets our brain into the logical space rather than the emotional space. And keep looking at your crops so that there's no surprises at the end. We're going to do this again on October the 10th. And so keep an eye out for those invites. And before we finish up, Bronwyn, do you have any last comments?
I think you've both covered anything that I was going to add. The only one I can think of too is, as Dale said, head to the resources section in the Soil Moisture Probe portal. There's some really good videos that give you a bit of a tour around the site so you know how to get around. There's also some really fabulous fact sheets that we developed with Dale for both cropping and pasture systems around soil moisture levels and where you are in the season, which are well worth a look. I'd encourage you to have a look at those and just keep getting yourself familiar with the data portal so it becomes a habit and you can use it regularly. Thanks, Kate.